Welcome back to Book Break! I'm here today to matchmake you guys with your perfect book. So we asked you over on our Instagram at BookBreakUK to send us your overly specific book recommendations, and then myself and the team have been scouring our bookshelves to find you your perfect book. If you'd like us to matchmake you with a book one day, then do keep an eye on our Instagram because every few months we do these call-outs. But let's get right into it, starting with a relatively easy one. Tina Louise Reads Books gave us 3 words: isolation, house, creepy. And straight away I thought of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is not a ghost story, but it is so creepy nevertheless. It's about 2 sisters who live in this creepy, isolated house with only a cat and their uncle Julian for company, and their uncle is losing his memory and his grasp on reality. Now, the reason the girls are so isolated is because the rest of their family died one terrible night, all of them poisoned, and the older sister, Constance, was suspected of having murdered them. She was never convicted, but the girls still find themselves totally banished from the rest of the village. And this is a very short, very scary, very atmospheric book about what happens when the girls start to let some of the outside in. Me and Matilda asked for a book with non-American witches or folklore, so for that I'm going to recommend The People Could Fly by Virginia Hamilton. So this is a collection of retellings of American black folk tales, and the author Virginia Hamilton has had these stories passed down to her through the years as the stories that kept her ancestors' culture alive during the time when they were enslaved. I really liked researching for this prompt. I think it's a really fun one, and we do actually have a whole episode planned coming up about folk stories from around the world, but I think that one's a great place to start. And if you listen to the audiobook, it's narrated by James Earl Jones. Hughes Soph asked for a book that dips in and out of characters' lives at certain points, like the book One Day. So I'm going to recommend The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. This one, I'm sure you've heard of, it has been everywhere all over BookTube, and it really is that brilliant. So this follows the lives of 2 twin sisters who are very light-skinned black women, and their lives take very different paths when one of them decides to pass as a white woman and marry into a white family. So it's inspired by the classic book Passing by Nella Larsen, and we actually have a whole video that an amazing guest host, Bookish Babe, made for us, which I will link to below, which is a whole recommendation video of books to read after you've read and loved The Vanishing Half. But starting with this one, yes, it dips in and out of these characters' lives as they grow up, even goes through the generations to follow their daughters and how their lives are affected by this as well. Ramblings of an Elfpire wanted sci-fi with realistic science and believable characters, something like The Martian. So for this I'm going to recommend The Return by John Barnes and Buzz Aldrin. Yes, that Buzz Aldrin. You don't get much more realistic space fiction than this, written by a man who has actually been there. So this is about the detonation of a nuclear device on Earth that sends the International Space Station plummeting down to Earth, and only one astronaut can save the day. Elena Maria Boni wanted historical fiction about Impressionist painters, so I think you would love Claude and Camille by Stephanie Cowell. So this is, as you may have guessed, about Claude Monet and his love story with his wife Camille. So you get this really romantic, moving love story, but if you're here for the art, you get a lot of that as well. So you get to meet, as well as Monet, you meet Manet, Renoir, Cézanne, and you get to follow a lot of them developing their new art style. Books and Pine Cones contributed my favourite prompt. This one made me laugh. She asked for a book with a witch and a monkey, please, which I thought was impossible, but then when I asked the digital team, they all instantly thought, obviously, of The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum. I doubt there is anyone left on Earth who needs me to tell you the story of The Wizard of Oz. I actually have never read this book, but I have, of course, seen the beloved musical movie, which stars the Wicked Witch of the West and her flying monkeys. And I did check, the monkeys do also appear in the book, although they have a slightly different role. They're not actually minions to the witch in the book, so you'll have to read it to find out how it's a bit different. Abe Lellam's books asked for classical British humour that satirises society, but that isn't Wodehouse, Wilde or War. I'm guessing because you've already read all of their work. So, have you read The Diary of a Nobody by George Grossmith and Whedon Grossmith? This is a fictional diary of the life of a man called Charles Pluter, who is really self-important, thinks that he's better than everyone around him, but still always ends up embarrassing himself. And Evelyn Waugh apparently actually grew up with his parents reading this book aloud, crowd, so he was definitely familiar with it. I'm sure it inspired some of his own humour, and in fact, in Brideshead Revisited, one of the characters is reading the book. Bogus Lady wants to read a book with a few people trapped in a room and having to solve riddles or play a game to escape. So this one was a no-brainer for me. You should read The Escape Room by Megan Golden. This has exactly what you asked for. It's literally about a group of colleagues who are trapped in an elevator and have to solve all of these riddles to escape and literally end up fighting for their lives. But you also get flashbacks to find out pieces of this bigger mystery, which is all going to become relevant. Passan Tamra Eltarak asked for a thriller with an unhinged stalker main character, so I instantly thought of Our Kind of Cruelty by Araminta Hall. This has actually been quite a divisive book because the main character is so creepy and terrifying that some people just can't get on with it. I loved it because I love to read books with unlikable protagonists. So this book is from the perspective of a man who used to have a game he used to play with his ex-girlfriend where they would go out to a bar, she would flirt with somebody else, and then he would come over and intervene. And they had this role play that was part of their game. They've now broken up and she is in a new serious relationship. And our main character becomes convinced that she is still playing the game. And so we see everything from his perspective. We see how delusional he is, how completely he believes that she is sending him messages and trying to get him to come and intervene with her new relationship. But we understand that that's not what's going on and that this main character is actually becoming a very scary stalker in her life. Two Books in Tasman wanted a sci-fi book with a queer romance like Wayfarer, so for that I'm going to recommend A Memory Called Empire by Arcady Martin. I have recommended this in a few videos already. I will link to the video we did on LGBTQIA+ books in every genre. That was our sci-fi pick there. But this book actually has quite a few queer characters and a few different queer romances going on, so I think you'll love it. Unbreakable Spines asked for a circus-themed thriller, so I'm going to recommend you The Hourglass Factory by Lucy Ribchester. This is more of a mystery adventure than a dark, scary psychological thriller, but I hope it gives you what you're after. The book is set in 1912 and it follows a journalist called Frankie who is writing a story about this acrobat called Ebony Diamond who suddenly mysteriously disappears, and so Frankie ends up having to uncover a much bigger, darker story. And the book has got the circus, it's got suffragettes, it's got tigers, it's got Jack the Ripper, it's got the sinking of the Titanic. It is packed full. MB the 1975 wants to read about someone looking for a person in a big city, and the book takes place all in one day or night. So I think you would enjoy Untold Night and Day by Bae Swa. This book takes place all over the course of one hot South Korean day and night, so hopefully that still counts. Our main character is the 28-year-old Ayami who works at a theatre for the blind, which is now shutting down, so she doesn't know what she's going to do with her life. And the book takes place in the night and day following her last shift, as she wanders the city looking for a former friend who has gone missing. And it's a very unusual book. It blends kind of parallel lives and really pushes at the edge of reality. Cycling Dove wants to read something like Kate Morton's books. She's very famous for her dual timelines, but with the past section set in the 1910s. So I'm going to recommend The Alice Network by Kate Quinn, which is a dual timeline story. It's set pretty much between the two wars. So the later section is set just after World War II. It's in 1947, and we follow a young socialite called Charlie Sinclair who is pregnant and unmarried and about to be thrown out of her family. And then we also flash back to 1915 and meet a young woman called Eve who is becoming a spy. And in the 1947 section, these two women's lives will connect. Jess Reads Things asked for cozy queer witches in a woodland landscape, and I've got one that feels so perfect for that I hope you haven't already read it. That is Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Xu. So this one is set in New England and follows a teenage witch called Nova who works at her grandmother's occult bookshop until one day she follows reports of a white wolf sighting into the woods, and there in the woodland she comes across her childhood crush Tam, who is a werewolf. So it sounds very cozy, very queer, and it's set in the woods. That's exactly what you wanted, right? Ben44 wanted to read about rich housewives and murder, so you should read Thunder Girls by Melanie Blake. This is actually about a group of women who are rich not because of of their husbands, but because they were once in an 80s pop group. They were once the absolute height of fame before it all fell apart. And now, 30 years later, they have gone through addictions, divorces, breakdowns, and they have now decided to reform the band. But somebody out there wants to see them fail, and it's going to get deadly. Rachel Reeds wanted a wintry historical fiction with Christmas as a main theme, so I'm going to recommend for this one Hidden Sea by Gregory Maguire. Gregory Maguire is the guy who wrote Wicked, which is a Wizard of Oz retelling, and this, Hidden Sea, is a retelling of that Christmas classic, The Nutcracker. So the book takes us back to Bavaria in 1808, where we meet a young boy who will become a toy maker. So the book isn't exactly about Christmas, but it is putting a new spin on a beloved Christmas tale. Jessica Huibergs wanted a book from the perspective of a wild animal in the forest, so you should read Call of the Wild by Jack London. This is about a dog called Buck, who is stolen from his home and sold to become a sled dog in Alaska, and it's about him becoming increasingly wild in this new landscape, which does at least partly include a forest. Jade Poppy wanted a book with the same feels and tone as Love is for Losers. So I think another YA book that captures that balance that Love is for Losers had really well for me, of being funny and lighthearted but also covering much deeper issues, is Saving Francesca by Melina Marchetta. So for example, the kinds of issues being explored in here, the main character's mother has depression. So the book isn't just happy and easygoing all the time, but we have this wonderful group of friends who support each other through everything they're going through. Read While It Rains wanted a family saga with long time jumps. You should definitely read The Cazalet Chronicles by Elizabeth Jane Howard. So this follows the members of this very privileged family. It's a series of 5 books starting in the 1930s, and we go up to the 1950s, so you do get lots of these jumps through time and through the generations, and it finishes up at Christmas. So Rachel Reeds, there is another one for you. Tea Not Coffee 13 wanted a book with a cat in it, so you should read The Guest Cat by Takashi Hiraide. This is about a couple in Tokyo who have pretty much run out of things to say to each other, until one day a stray cat begins showing up in their kitchen, which brings something new to their life. And it's actually a very philosophical book. It's largely about the meaning and nature of life, but it is also about the cat. We're nearly there, 2 to go. Connor's Library Corner asked for a book with a twist ending that would make him cry. And that's actually a rather unusual request. Twist endings usually make you surprised rather than cry, but I instantly knew what to recommend, and that is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. So this has exactly that. It is a YA book about a young gay boy in New York struggling to come to terms with his sexuality and his family's response to his sexuality. And it has a twist towards the end which is so surprising and so emotional that it did absolutely make me cry with this big realisation that you get. And finally, Magic and Musings Books had a bunch of keywords she wanted us to include in our search. They were Europe, summer, period piece, LGBT, romance, but not the book Call Me By Your Name. I guess she's already read that one. So I do have a recommendation, and that is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. This is an absolutely beautiful book set between the 90s and the 60s, set between Oxford and one summer in France. So we've got Europe, summer, historical fiction, and it is a LGBT romance. So our main character is a bisexual man, and he has these 2 major love stories in his life, one with his wife Annie and one with a childhood friend called Michael. It's absolutely stunning, it broke my heart, and I think you'll love it. So there you go, hopefully I have found the absolute perfect book for everyone who requested one. If any of these were you, do leave a comment and let me know if you like the sound of the book I've picked for you, and do go over to our Instagram at BookBreakUK and look out for the next time I ask for your requests. I'll also link a playlist here of all of the other times we have done videos like this, so you can go through and see if anyone else had comments that match exactly what you're looking for as well. Maybe you'll find your perfect book that way too. See you next time!